time for another installment in our Davis Brothers doctorate series of typewriter examination. And
we're really pumping them out, aren't we?
Yeah.
I think November was the last time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a pretty unique machine here. This might look familiar to Herman Price because Will here traded a a German?
It's a Urania, first model Urania portable.
Straight up for this.
Yep.
And so this is an Anell typewriter.
Yep. These are pretty hard to find. Let's take a look around it here. It says Anell with an accent after the last L. It's number 3A. This machine is in rough condition, but it's important to note that it's mechanically complete. It's missing side panels.
Right, yep.
That should be screwed on there, but that's all right. That's how Herman found it. And
unless Herman removed those for scrap.
Unless he put them on his other good one, yeah. And it says the Annell Typewriter Company, Chicago, Illinois. Interesting. We noticed that there's also an accent after the letter A in Anell. Do you see that right there? Oh, that's a little... Yeah, see that? It says the Anell, and Anell's in quotes, and there's an accent after A and after the last L.
That's weird.
And then a quote. I guess they're kind of trying to convince you of how you're supposed to pronounce it.
I don't know.
So there it is. Now these are pretty unusual. You'll see them in the collector books.
There's only 11 known to actually exist, though, in the hands of... Well, 11 known to exist, period.
Yeah, 11 survive. We've got serial numbers on them. We'll get into that in a moment. But
let's just assume for a moment that you, like we, just got this machine and you're interested in trying to figure out whatever you can about it.
Right.
And one of the things we want to talk about in this video was the use of ephemera in researching typewriters. So let's just... Before we get into anything else, let's see what we might have that would help us understand what this is.
Right, so I might go to my collector's books. So here's pretty much two different versions of the same thing. This is two modern-day published versions of the 1923 Typewriter Topics Historical Compendium. Typewriter Topics was a trade paper. 1923, they did a history of typewriters. That was republished in this Dan Post reprint, along with a bunch of typewriter ads. They redid it in 1924 with a year's worth of added information, sort of, last minute. That has been available in this larger, soft cover version. No ads, but like I said, it's the 1924 version. It has the added info. Well, if I go in these, I'll find just a very short reference. It says the Woodstock number 4 was sold for a short time in 1922 by mail order. I think it says in an unsuccessful campaign.
Right.
Okay, well, if I am lucky enough to have a little bit more advanced collecting material, like this Office Machines and Equipment Federation serial number guide here, and I go down to Woodstock number 4, I see number 3 and 4 there, 1914 to 1917, and then 4 ends, and the 5 takes over. Well, that doesn't jive well with 1922, does it?
Right, so we've already got a contradiction.
There's already a mystery right there.
Yeah, already a contradiction.
Already a mystery.
Sources.
So maybe I look around and I find an advertisement for the Anell. I could probably find out on eBay, and I'll tell you what, that's probably the first ad you'll see for it on eBay.
Yep.
And so, amazing value. It's brand new from the factory to you. Big saving and a free trial, easy terms. Send for information, not an order. So we know that they're saying it's a brand new typewriter.
Now, does that involve, or does that ad mention our buddy?
It does not.
Okay.
But that one does.
Right.
I used Google Books to find this ad, and look right there. Harry A. Smith. Now, he's saying his name is Harry Annell Smith in this ad, but seeing as every bit of my research says that that's actually a female name, and also seeing that I've actually seen his death certificate, I don't think that's his middle name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and so if I read this ad, it's typical Harry A. Smith ad copy. I see that the price point of this typewriter in 1929 or 1922 is $69. Okay, so it's
Now,
definitely a cut rate machine.
yep, and it's worth mentioning that the ads for the Anell only appear for 1 year.
Right. The earliest ad I found was January 1922. The last ad I found was January 1923. Now here, and I'm going to pull this far out so it's redacted. That is a list of the known serial numbers that I talk to collectors, and they have circulating serial number lists, and of course we all share them with each other. That list right there, you could see, if you could read that, you'd see that there are 11 known Anell typewriters. We have serial numbers on 8 of those, and they're all from between A1370 something and A1970 something. So in other words, if I guess that they started at 1,000 and maybe ended at 2,000, there's maybe 1,000 machines made for a whole year.
Yep.
That's kind of a surprise. That's a really low rate of production.
Right, and that would explain why so few survive today.
Yeah. Now, of course, that's a fairly high percentage of survivors, on the other hand.
It would be.
Percentage-wise, out of 1,000, if we, and I hate to bring it up in every video, but if we look at the Visograph, there's about the same number of machines made and roughly 4 times, or there's the same number surviving and roughly 4 times as many made.
Right. Well,
So
that brings us to, well, okay, so let's assume just think about the things we already know about this typewriter, and the implication being that it has a somewhat higher survival rate. Why might that be? And that answer lies in what its mechanism really is.
that's right, because it really is related to the wood stock. So if I wanted to figure out what this really is, using everything we just read over there, I would probably want to have a number 4 wood stock. Just guessing at the frequency with which Typewriter Topics is correct, I'd probably want a number 4 wood stock. And wouldn't you know it,
Number 4
we
wood stock.
just happen to have one.
So let's see if we can. Let's think about now them saying that it was sold. The number 4 it was sold under the Annell name.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can find that might substantiate or disprove that.
Right. Now, I'll tell you right now, I'm gonna save you a little suspense. We've already done all the legwork on this job. We already went through these typewriters for hours.
Yep.
Prior to this, and that's going to save you some agony watching us compare bolt for bolt with these machines.
Right.
So what we really want to tell you about these is that there is some truth to saying that it's a Woodstock number 4 if you know how the Woodstock number 4 and 5 differ. But the plain fact of the matter is that most of that typewriter is not a Woodstock.
Right. The heaviest parts and the biggest parts, we're talking about the frame, the top deck, the substructure of the carriage, and a couple of other parts.
Right, main cross member that the key levers.
Right. Those are different than this. However, much of, if not all, of the mechanism is identical. There are a lot of parts you could swap between the two machines, and you would never know the difference between them.
Right. So what we have here is a completely different frame, casting, deck casting, carriage, intermediate mounting, into which Woodstock typewriter parts will mount.
And they're not all number 4 parts.
Right, and
they're not Woodstock 4 parts, and they're not all Woodstock 3 parts.
And some of them
are 5
parts, because this was being made when the number 5 was out and the 4 was gone.
The most visible feature, if we just want to show it real quick, this scale.
Yeah, let's take a look at a couple of these small parts. Like we just mentioned, that it's a 5. Well, see how the scale goes up and down there?
With the carriage.
With the carriage,
So it's attached to the carriage.
that came out on the 5. if we look at the scale, and it's kind of hard to see here in this light,
Yep.
the scale stays sitting there on the
That's
floor.
right here.
Yeah.
It's right there. It
Oh, there
doesn't-
you go.
It's not attached to the carriage at
Yep,
all.
it stays sitting there.
That's
so
a 5 feature.
Yeah, that's a 5 feature. Matter of fact, I already went through and did that. So let's just point out here a couple of things between 3, 4, and 5. And yes, somewhere over here, we did actually find in Typewriter Topics, courtesy Richard Polt, some exceedingly high quality illustrations of the number 3, so good that we can make out detail on internal parts. There's one of them that'll become important in a moment. So we actually can get a decent look at a 3.
Woodstock 3s are hard.
Those are really hard to find. I know of one.
So it's less common than that.
Yeah, I know of one.
That's-
So looking at these machines here, let's address the big one first. Typewriter Topics said that this was the Woodstock 4 sold by mail order. We now know that most of that typewriter in terms of mass is not a Woodstock number 4.
Right. It's new.
So why would they call it a 4? Well, one of the biggest changes between the 4 and the 5 was automatic ribbon reverse. 4 doesn't have it. 5 has it. So if you were familiar with Woodstock typewriters and you saw this Anell come out in 1922, years after Woodstock had introduced automatic ribbon reverse, you'd say, oh, this goes back to being like the 4 because it doesn't have automatic ribbon reverse.
Right.
So now you can see how some of those offhand comments in Typewriter Topics might seem a little misleading, but might be accurate.
There's a kernel of truth in
That's
almost
right.
all of them.
That's
You
right.
just gotta sniff it out.
We already showed you the line indicator on the Anell. That's like the number 5 Woodstock. The paper edge guide, the 4 doesn't have one, the Anell doesn't have one, but the 5 adds it. The paper fingers on this machine they change on the 5. Well, this is completely different from any of them.
Yep.
This little bail that pulls forward is different from any other Woodstock. The 5 has tall pointers on the margin stops on the back of the machine. Neither of these has it.
Right.
So the margin stops on the Anell are more like the 3 and the 4. And then the ribbon reverse device has a complicated little detente in it. And on the Anell, it's actually a lot more like the 3.
Right. Simplified, yeah.
Right. Now let's show you something else. Dave, maybe you can turn those sideways real quick. We'll show you something really interesting. That number 4 there, I think we're all familiar with the Woodstock number 5. The most Woodstock typewriters you ever see are 5s, and they have a ribbon slipper switch right here. You see there's nothing here. What there is this little dial back here that I can use to adjust the ribbon height wherever I want it. It's a designed to allow you to use the whole ribbon up. So you'd go all the way one way for red, all the way down for black, if you had that in there. Well, if we look inside, we can see that shaft on that knob there is going through some mountings.
There you go.
Okay? You see it goes right through a mounting there. Well, oddly enough, if I come over here to the Anell and I look inside, look at that mounting there with a hole in it, which would have held that shaft if this were a Woodstock number 4, but of course it's not there because there's a panel mounted over here. Right? So there's no shaft there. So that's kind of like the 4. Now, of course, here's something we found out. This is probably the worst feature on the whole typewriter. This was advertised as having a 2-color ribbon, and it took me forever to figure out how in the heck you get a 2-color ribbon. And the answer is this. There's a little tab here that you can lift up on, and then if you hold it all the way up, you get red. That's just terrible. So there's your 2-color ribbon device.
It's not a lie.
That's
but
not
it's
a lie.
something you won't use.
Yeah. Thanks, Harry A. Smith. Yeah, that's just terrible. So what we have here is a machine that in the largest amount of physical mass in the typewriter is a new and different construct.
Right.
It mounts Woodstock parts of various models.
Right.
Okay?
Sold for a year.
Yep, that's about as clear as I can make that in one sentence as to what the Anell is and isn't. Now, the $64,000 question is why?
Right, and that's the one that. What would the advantage be of doing that?
Right. So we already know that this typewriter was sold for $69. And the word on the street about the Woodstock is that it's a solid $100 typewriter, the whole way through. Well, it turns out that's not entirely true.
Sold for $100.
Yeah, that's right. But if I go over here and I look, I happen to have some Woodstock number 4 sales material. Here's a catalog. When you see that ad, it says "Send for particulars." This is the particulars, and there's a nice little reminder card in here showing the features of the number 4, blah blah blah, and all these testimonials. There's 100 testimonials or so in this book from buyers of the machine. Well, along with that, I got this installment order blank to send away for the typewriter, and when I do, I receive this credit draft for $32. A profit-sharing credit draft. If I agree to show this machine to my friends and provide testimonials, they take $32 off. That makes the typewriter essentially a $68 typewriter. So
it's a familiar sounding number.
So that's a $68 typewriter, not a $100 typewriter. Now, we were actually having a little bit of a laugh about Harry A. Smith's wording in this ad. He says and by the way, Harry A. Smith is known to have taken over marketing for the Anell in like April of 1922. He says in the ad here, real need has long existed for a full-size 4-bank, 42-key, 84-character keyboard typewriter, blah, 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 less than $100. Well, sure it has, and It actually happened. It happened with this, okay?
That would seem to fill
it was happening for a long time with this. That is a Pittsburgh Visible number 11. The Pittsburgh Visibles and the Reliance Visibles that followed were never sold at $100.
Right, so Harry's right.
He's right.
The long has long existed, but it was filled.
That's right. That's right. Well, this fills it again. So the question is, when they're selling the number 5 for $100, why this? Well, our answer is the quality of those castings, the reduction in features, and the workmanship on the typewriter. These castings on this typewriter are nowhere near the quality that they are on the number 4 or any other Woodstock I've ever seen.
No, and nor is the finishing. The castings have very few, if any, rounded edges. They're angular. They're straight. And there is very little machining done to the castings anywhere, and especially notable underneath. The castings are very rough.
Yeah, the front frame is not identical depth or width all the way across underneath. That one's even. Woodstock advertised their pride in the quality of their castings and the manufacture of their typewriters in Typewriter Topics. They had a big feature in there one of those years. That Anell certainly wouldn't fit that bill. But if it's that much less expensive to manufacture because you've taken away all that workmanship that's necessary.
Right. All that expensive operations of finishing.
Right.
When it's already expensive to make the type bars and the mechanism, if you can get a much cheaper frame and top deck, that would represent a huge savings. And that's just a guess, but also think about the years this is being made. A few of the parts on here are 5s, some of them are 4s, and some of them are 3s. So it might also be a good way to use up some parts that have been around that there's no other way to use.
Yep.
And if you can get somebody or you can cast some frames and some decks real cheap, and you can slap together several hundred or maybe 1,000 machines out of it.
Yeah. Now we know from looking at the ads we found for the Anell that the machine was available for some of the time with special keyboards. You could get a telegrapher or a pharmacist So they had some wiggle room to manufacture some machines, or they had some machines, depending on how you see it, that were keyed that way.
And since the key inserts and everything are the same, and the key levers and slugs are the same, if somebody did happen to order a special keyboard Anell, all they need to do is obtain the correct corresponding parts from Woodstock and put them in. So
That's right.
that would be easily doable.
Yep.
That would be no big deal.
Right. So there's your there's our answer as to what the Anell is. It's very largely a new and different typewriter in terms of the materials in the machine.
Right. The why and the how are still kind of up in the air, but we know a lot more about it now than we did before.
Right. So tell us what you think. Put some comments down there in the comment section, or comment on the blog if that's how you got to the video.
Email.
Yeah, email.
Telephone.
Yeah.
Carry pigeon.
Throw a rock through the window when you drive by, something like that, and let us know what you think. And if you have any questions, we'll try to answer. And if we get a whole bunch, well, we'll do a questions video on these two typewriters.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's it for now.